past 12 months, the number of long-term unemployed is down by 849,000. May, the civilian workforce rose by 397,000. The labor force participation rate, something that we look at of late, little change at 62.9%. Since April 2014, the participation rate has remained within a narrow range of 62.7% to 62.9%. You can see that's 2/10 there again. The employment population ratio at 59.4% was essentially unchanged in May. The number of persons employed part-time for economic reasons as individuals, part-time workers showed little change at 6.7 million in May, and has shown little movement in recent months. In May, 1.9 million persons were marginally attached to the labor force, down by 268,000 from a year earlier. The data are not seasonally adjusted there. Amongst the marginally attached, there were 568,000 discouraged workers in May, down by 137,000 from a year earlier. And now to the establishment survey data we just gave the household. The total non-farm payroll employment rose by 280,000, compared with an average monthly gain of 251,000. We've talked about this several times, that to take the slack out of the job market at present, you need roughly 350 to 400,000 jobs created per month. So you're getting 251,000. That is below the preferred, as they say, numbers here. Professional and business services added 63,000 jobs in May and 671,000 over the year. In May, the employment increased in computer system design and related services by 10,000. Employment continued to trend up in temporary health services. We look at this very, very closely. 20,000 in management and technical consulting services, 7,000, and in architectural and engineering services, 5,000. We used to get those numbers from Manpower there on the temporary. Employment in leisure and hospitality increased by 57,000 in May, following a little change over the prior 2 months. In May, employment edged up in arts, entertainment, recreation, 29,000 there. Employment in food services, drink places had little change, net change over the past 3 months. Healthcare added 47,000 jobs in May. Within the industry, employees in ambulatory care services, which includes home health care services and outpatient care centers, rose by 28,000. Medical centers added 16,000 jobs over the month, and over the past year, healthcare has added 408,000 jobs. There was information put out when the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, was passed, but you would not see growth. In fact, you would see redundancies in the healthcare sector. This has turned out to be not factual. It was just an assumption. Unemployment in retail edged up in May, usually it does, 31,000 over the prior 12 months. The industry has added an average of 24,000 jobs per month within the retail trade. Automobile dealers added 8,000 jobs in May. Spring and summer is usually a very good time for the automotive sector. Construction employment continued to trend up over the month, 17,000, and has increased by 273,000 over the past year. In May, Employment continued upward trend in transportation, warehousing, 13,000 here. Truck transportation added 9,000 jobs over the month. In May, employment continued to trend up in financial activities. 13,000 were added there. Over the past 12 months, the industry added 160,000 jobs, with about half of the gains in insurance carriers there. Employment in mining fell. Now that includes fracking, etc. A fifth month in a row. Lesser surprise, activities for mining. Employment in mining has decreased by 68,000 this year, after increasing 41,000 in 2014. Rigs in the oil fields have dropped. We don't have that information here at hand this time around. We'll get it next week. In other major industries, including manufacturing, wholesale trade, information, and government, showed little change over the month. The average work week for all workers on private non-farm payrolls remained at 34.5 hours in May. Manufacturing worker work week was unchanged at 40.7. Factory overtime 3.3 hours there. The average work week for production and non-supervisory workers on private non-farm payrolls edged up 1/10 of an hour to 33.7 hours. In May, the average hourly earning for all employed on private non-farm payrolls rose by 8 cents to $24.96. You can see why the campaign for 15 is very important, because it's $10 below the average. And that will be achieved, I believe, out in Los Angeles by 2020, 5 years off. The average hourly earning for private sector production and non-supervisory workers rose by 6 cents to $20.97. The change in non-farm payroll employment for March was revised from 85,000 to 119,000. The change for April was revised from 223,000 to 21,000. Dropped a bit there. With these revisions, employment gains in March and April combined were, and it's interesting how they did this, 32,000 more than previously reported over the past 3 months. Job gains have averaged 207,000 per month there. So that's roughly about half of where we should be to pull out of the depression here. Let me just grab, we should get this. This is from the Bureau of Economic Analysis here, and the Bureau, the Census Bureau and Analysis there, Department of Commerce. Goods and services deficit was 40.9 billion in April, down 9.7 billion from 50.6 billion, in March. Revised April's exports were 189.9 billion, 1.9 billion more than March exports. April imports were 230.8 billion, 7.8 billion less than March imports. The April decrease in goods and services deficit reflects a decrease in goods deficit of 9.3 billion to 60.7 billion, an increase in the service surplus of 0.4 billion to 19.8 billion. The year-to-year goods and services deficit increased 1.5 billion, or 0.9% for the same period in 2014. Exports decreased 18 billion are 2.3%. Imports decreased 16.5 billion, are 1.8% there. Let me just hit the highlights here. Year-over-year average of goods and services deficit decreased 0.5 billion for the first 3 months ending in April. Average exports of goods and services decreased 4.9 billion from April of 2014. The average export of that was export there. Import of goods and services decreased by 5.4 billion from April 2014. Imports of goods decreased 7.4 billion to 189.6 billion in April. Imports of goods on a census basis decreased 7.5%. Consumer goods decreased 4.9 billion. That was 7.5 billion. I'm sorry. Cell phones and other household goods decreased by 1.3 billion. Other textile apparel household goods decreased by 0.9 billion. Footwear decreased by 0.8 billion. New balance of payment adjustment increased 1/10 billion. Imports of services decreased 0.4 billion to 41.1 billion in April. Transportation decreased 0.5 billion. Travel for all purposes, including education, increased 1/10 billion. Real goods in $2,009. Real goods deficit decreased 9.2 billion to 57.2 billion in April. Real exports of goods increased 2.9 billion to 121.6 billion, and real import of goods decreased 6.4 billion to 178.8 billion. I want to get into some of the revisions here. Import of goods were revised downward. This is for March to 0.5 billion. Import of services were revised downward 1/10 billion. Export of goods were revised down. This is for March towards less than 1/10 billion. Export of services were revised upward 1/10 billion. Goods and services by select countries there. The first quarter figures show surpluses in billions of dollars with South and Central America 16.4, Brazil 67.4, OPEC 6.2 billion, United Kingdom 3 there, and Canada 2.9, Saudi Arabia 1.4, Germany 19.7, Japan 614.1, Mexico here, let's see, 12.2, Italy 7.9, India 7.2, and South Korea at 5, and France at 3.3. Deficit with China increased 6.4 billion to 89.1 billion in Q1, the first quarter. Exports decreased by 2.8 billion to 39.9 billion. Imports increased 3.6 billion to 129 billion. The balance with OPEC shifted from a deficit of 1.5 billion to a surplus of 6.2 billion in Q1. Exports decreased 1.1 billion to 27.1 billion, and imports decreased 8.